Hey everyone, it's John Little here. I want to make a short video and just talk about something that I ran onto. It is a fragment in the Dead Sea Scrolls called 7Q5. Cave number 7. I just recently did an essay on fragments 7Q1, which is a small portion of the book of Exodus, chapter 28. But there's been a claim, and it's a pretty exciting claim. It's been a claim that's been around for a while and rejected by most scholars. But when scholars reject something, I'm learning to take that with a grain of salt, because as I proved in my last video on my essay on a fragment of the Dead Sea Scrolls, most scholars have claimed that 7Q1 is a Greek fragment that supports the Masoretic text and not the Greek Septuagint. And I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that that fragment 7Q1 is actually 100% Greek Septuagint. And the reason why, when it comes to scholars, they will follow the narrative that they're expected to follow most of the time. Rarely do you have a scholar that is a free thinker and is willing to go against the consensus of other scholars, because just like we've learned in the past and within the last 5 years, doctors will follow the narrative of the consensus. And unfortunately, there were a lot of doctors that supported something and it was against their better judgment, but they knew, they all have mortgages, they all have a nice income coming in the same way with scientists. They will go along with the narrative, and those who don't go along with the consensus and the narrative get railroaded. Some of them will even lose their lives. I'm not saying that biblical scholars will do that, will lose their lives. I guess it would be possible. Depends on how serious the claim is that they're expected to follow. But I do know in the medical industry and in the scientific world, you can get in a lot of trouble by not following the official narrative that the powers that should not be expect you to follow. Since this is going to be on YouTube, I'm going to be careful on how far I go with this. But when it comes to biblical scholarship, like I said, if Bible scholars in the world of academia don't go along with the consensus, well, guess what? There's a good chance that they'll lose their position in the world of academia. They'll lose money. They'll make sure, the powers that be will make sure that any books that they try to publish, if they're not towing the line, then they're going to have a hard time publishing their books. They won't be able to publish their books in any mainstream book publishing companies. They'll have to go to places more like the free speech platforms, and it's not going to be circulated like it would otherwise if you go along with the mainstream media, or not a mainstream media, but a mainstream publishing company. That's how it works, sadly. But, like with my other essay, I didn't say too much in the last video about what I'm saying now, because I just wanted to focus on the essay. But in that essay, I pointed out that the claims made by scholars that 7Q1 follows the readings of the Hebrew Masoretic text and not the Septuagint is a narrative that scholars are expected to follow. There is an expectation for most scholars in academia to have a bias towards the Hebrew Masoretic text, which is, the Hebrew Masoretic text is the official Old Testament version of Rabbinic Judaism. And also it is, and I mentioned this in the last video too, it's the standard Hebrew Old Testament text that most Bible translators translate from. That's the standard basis of their Old Testament text that they translate from. And so, yeah, you have people that have a special interest when it comes to the Hebrew Masoretic text, because the world of, there's ideologies, political ideologies out there that are tied right along with modern day rabbinic Judaism. And there's a lot of influence, a lot of power there. There's a lot of funding that comes from those within the higher echelons that have a Masoretic text supremacy bias to them. So that's why you'll see a lot of scholars, that they're the ones that there's a lot of funding that goes into the world of academia in these universities, in these seminaries, and so on. And that's why a consensus will support something that the powers of that should not be pushed. But anyway, now getting to this fragment, as you can see on the screen, I've got zoomed in on this fragment. And this is actually a fragment that's been enhanced with infrared. The actual photo of this fragment without the infrared is harder to see. And as you can see, it's probably not easy, especially for those who don't know Greek. They're not familiar with uncial, ancient uncial Greek manuscripts, which is what the very ancient manuscripts, that's the kind of script they use, was uncial. That means it's all capital Greek letters. Typically, there's no spaces between lines. As we can see here, there's perhaps a little bit of spaces in between some of the lines, which is interesting. It's not real common, but you will find sometimes some spaces, a little bit. And then there's definitely no punctuation in it. And so the modern, or even just the typical, the modern, when you get a Greek New Testament and it's in Koine Greek, the script is significantly different than what an uncial script is. The sigma looks completely different. The capital omega looks completely different than what an omega looks in an uncial man. And there's quite a few that look quite a bit different. And so the claim made, the interesting claim made, and it's exciting, but I have to say, as I've looked into this, it's not looking good that this fragment is a fragment from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verse 52 and 53. And I'll just point out this, and trust me, I've got, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I just now today, just this morning, started looking into this, and because, this is from cave number 7. This is 7Q5. It's a fragment, a Greek fragment, and I just finished an essay and a video, my last video on YouTube, on 7Q1. So this fragment comes out of the same cave that the other fragment that I just researched and studied and did an essay on, cave number 7. Interesting thing about cave number 7 is that every fragment that comes from that cave are all Greek fragments. And most of the Dead Sea Scrolls, all the fragments, all the text, sorry, there's a helicopter flying by, so they're probably, it's probably Big Brother watching me right now. But, I usually say a lot of things that the powers that be don't like. But anyway, this fragment, they claim, is from the Gospel of Mark. And yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Cave number 7 is all fragments. Most of the manuscripts, all the fragments and stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls are Hebrew. A good portion of them are also Aramaic. So the fact that we have a whole cave that's nothing but Greek, that's interesting. But it just goes to show that the people in Qumran, the Jews that were living there, they also used the Greek Septuagint. But taking a look at this fragment, let's go ahead and just jump in here. And this, like I said, this is just a quick little explanation of what I've seen so far that makes me think that this is not a fragment from the Gospel of Mark. Is take a look at this first line. You have a 2, an omega, and what looks like a nu. That's what's suggested by those that are saying that this is a fragment of the Gospel of Mark, that it actually follows a reading. And then there's when you look at the screen there, there's like a big hole in the fragment there near the top. And, it's just where it's just decayed. And they claim that there's an eta, and it looks possible. Now, if that is true, then that could possibly support a reading from the Gospel of Mark. Auton a cardia, even though the cardia is not, there's no letters on this fragment, but it looks like there's possibly the word auton and then an eta, a, which is in the Gospel of Mark. So perhaps, but when you look at ahead of the 2 there, it'd be a T in English. I don't see anything in front of it. I see a few tiny little possible little ink marks, but those that suggest that this fragment is from the Gospel of Mark, there would be an alpha and an upsilon right there, and right in front of the 2. And I just don't see it. Like I said, it could be possible that it's just faded out, but really, I just don't see it. And that's just something that makes me, think, well, maybe it's not the Gospel of Mark. I would love for this to be a fragment from the Gospel of Mark, trust me. But I'm not seeing it so far. Then when you drop down to that second line, you see the Greek word kai, which is obvious. There's no doubt that that's what that is. And those that suggest that this is kai, or from the Gospel of Mark, obviously that is found in the Gospel of Mark in this passage. But then they claim that there's an eta on the far left there. When you see on the second line, when you look over there, they claim that that's an eta, but look how much space is in between that possible eta versus the chi. That is not consistent with the rest of the fragment. For whatever reason, that just doesn't look right, which causes me more doubt. And when I look at it, and trust me, I'm familiar with ancient Bible manuscripts, that doesn't really look like an eta. Because when you look at the eta down right in the middle of the screen right now, there's a nu and an eta there. That's what an eta looks like. Look at the end of the eta. Supposedly, up there at that one spot, that would be the end of an eta, and it doesn't look like it. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't look like an eta to me. So again, that casts doubt in my mind. It's just weird, especially that much space in between. It would be part of another word with an eta at the end, and then chi. Then here's the one that really causes a lot of doubt. After the word chi, those that suggest that this is from the Gospel of Mark, claims that is a delta after chi. And that is obviously not a delta. That's actually a p. Modern, people know modern Greek, and I know in algebra they call it pi, but it's in Koine Greek, in Erasmian Greek, you're trained to pronounce it as p, which would be the same as a p in English. But that's what a p looks like in Uncial Greek. And so I'm really shocked, and I'm going to have to do some reading. There's a lot of research by independent scholars. There's even a book out there that somebody wrote. I can't remember the actual name of the book, but it's in fact I just watched a video on it just this morning, and they claim that it's called 7Q5, and I think it's something like the Gospel of Mark and the Dead Sea Scrolls or something like that, or New Testament and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm surprised that anybody that suggests that this comes from the Gospel of Mark would think that that's a delta. And I'm like I said, I'm going to have to see what their explanations are. I haven't even began to look and see what other people's talking about. But I just don't see that. Then we'll go down to the next line. After this would be the third line on this fragment. And then we run into the claim that this fourth line would be two news, which would be ends in English, and an eta and a sigma. Now, first of all, if there's a sigma, any ink marks that they think is a sigma, there's absolutely, it's not obvious, to say the least. I don't see it. But, it doesn't mean that's not there, or it doesn't mean that that's not what it, was meant to be, but it's, the decay of the fragment stuff. I just don't see a sigma there. But what I see here in this fourth line, or this third line, is the very first letter that you can actually recognize is what's called a spi. And I talked about this in the last video, and I ran into a place where there was a possible spi, and I took a screenshot and put it in my essay of a spi from another fragment, and that is exactly what it looks like. It'd be, it's spelled, the letter is spelled PSI, spi. And that's what that looks like to me. And then it looks like there's a nu, and then there's an eta. And so, they claim that this is part of the word Gennesaret, is how it would, is pronounced in Koine Greek. And so, first of all, I only see one nu. There would have to be two nus, but I only see one. And so I just don't see it, folks. Wish I did. I wish I was starting off being more convinced. Again, I'm going to go through this in much greater detail. I'm going to spend some time on this to where there's no room for doubt for whatever conclusion I come up with. Hopefully. I mean, that's always, the intention is to at least figure it out and come to a conclusion and be fairly sure about it. Which, again, I've said this before, I have no problems being uncertain about something. If I'm not 100% sure about it, I'm not going to act like I'm 100% sure about it. But, I may end this research, I'll probably write an essay on it, and I'll probably end up, being pretty certain about what it is. I may not be 100%, but whatever. But anyway, there you go. That's just some of my first thoughts about as I get ready to study this and perhaps write an essay on it. It's fragment 7Q1 from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the claim is by some independent scholars, and I respect independent scholars. I highly respect anybody that's willing to think outside of the box. And I'm learning more and more here in the last while that scholars, it's just like I said, I make the comparison between biblical scholars in the world of academia. It's just like, doctors, people in the medical field, people in the scientific field. They're expected to follow the narrative, and if they think outside of the box, their careers and perhaps their life could be in jeopardy. I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying that's very common in the world of biblical scholarship, that your life could be at risk, from thinking outside of the box. But you will be railroaded and blackballed from the mainstream of academia if you color outside of the lines of what they expect. So anyway, I'll I appreciate you all. Take care. Have a good day.